Yun. হ্যাঁ, চাদর একই চাদর তো। ওই
So if you want to send the YouTube link to anybody, feel free to send. And so, Devanit is a co-host, Indira Moitreo. Right. Okay, so whom should I make the host? Shomadip?
Ma'am, make register an account host.
Okay, so I am making you the host. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello everyone. Welcome to Precision.
I am Somadeep, a third year BSc student. This is the fifth year of Precision. Unfortunately, due to the corona pandemic, we had to organize
The Precision online for the second time. If we look at the brighter side of these online conferences, this has made the scientific community come together. In this year, we have got a record number of registrations from India and from all over the world. We have selected around 20 talks and 10 posters which will be shown in the UG symposium from tomorrow and the day after. You can see the posters in our Slack channel also. This year, this program will be shown in both Zoom and YouTube. In this time of pandemic, what will be the future of physics will be discussed today in the evening, and as a physics student, what are the different aspects of career in academic sector will be discussed tomorrow by our alumni. I will like to invite everyone to attend those events. We are also holding the physics quiz brain trophy today in the afternoon session. So let me talk about a little bit about precision. It all started in 2017 during the Presidency University's bicentenary celebration. The main motto of holding precision was to increase UG research. We have got overwhelming response from India and abroad. We have got some remarkable talks in the UG symposium, which gives the idea of the quality of the research happening in the UG level. Before going to the talk, I would like to thank all of our faculty members and students of the department, specifically the LOC and SOC members, for their untiring effort, without whom this conference would not be possible. Without any delay, let us move to precision. I hope you will get some unforgettable moments. Let us move to the first event, the public lecture by Shubhajyoti Bid. The session will be chaired by Indira, who is a third year BSc student of Presidency University of Physics Department. I would like to hand over the mic to the chair. Indira, please carry on the session.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Shomadi. A very good morning to all of you. Welcome to the public talk session of Precision 21. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce to you our senior Shubhajyoti Bid. Shubhajyoti Da did his BSc and MSc at Presidency University. He is currently a junior research fellow at IIT Delhi, and his research interests focus on condensed matter physics. The title of today's talk is Emergence of Topology in Condensed Matter Physics. Now to our audience, please keep yourself muted and turn off our videos so that we all can save a little bandwidth. And if you have any questions, you can either write it in the chat box or raise your hand. Those who are watching live on YouTube, you can comment your questions and your questions will be addressed at the end of this talk. So without further delay, let us hear from Shubhajyoti Da. Shubhajyoti Da, please start.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Indra, for my kind introduction, and very good morning to all of you, and a warm welcome. So let me share the screen and notify me at least once whether I'm seen or not. Yeah. So can you see the screen?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's start. So today I'm going to discuss about emergence of topology in condensed matter. So the title of the talk is a bit catchy and it contains mainly three words. One is emergence, another is topology, and the third one is condensed matter. So let's come to these one by one. So what is emergence? Emergence is a collective property which is quite different from the individual properties of the constituents of the system. So a very classic example of emergence is life itself is emerging property. The parts inside cell, let's say the nucleus or DNA or mitochondria, whatever you have, they are not individually living, but when all of them are put together inside a cell, then the cell at the whole entity is living. So a life is emerging property. The next thing is topology. Topology is abstract part of mathematics that deals with shapes, objects like that we know from our school life about geometry. It is somewhat similar to geometry, but we will discuss what's the similarities and difference between geometry and topology, and how to go from one topology to another. We know how to go from one geometry to another. A triangle can be made a square, or a circle can be made something else. But how to go from one topology to another, that we will discuss. And the third one, the most important one, is condensed matter physics. So we all know what is condensed matter physics. Condensed matter physics is nothing but a supplier of materials. It supplies us with different materials that makes our life much more convenient and easier to live, and it helps to also develop the materials that were in past so that they are much more efficient. So this is the main job done by condensed matter physics. We will see that how this is also a classic example of how a mathematically abstract theory plays a very important role in some experimental topic. So without any delay, let's start. The talk has been again divided into 4 questions. I will answer them one by one. Only 4 simple questions. The first question is how condensed matter physics evolved. That is how it took shape in this planet, because we have changed the planet a lot so that we could live peacefully and our life is much more convenient. So how condensed matter physics played a role in that thing that we are going to discuss. So in this first part, I will go from past and come to present, that where we are now staying, and then I will definitely go to the future, and we'll see what kind of materials we need in future and what kind of changes we need, what kind of advancement we need to make to the materials that we now have. Then I will come to the second most important question. This question may seem very trivial to all of us. That is, what makes something a good conductor of electricity and insulators a bad conductor of electricity? So that question has been baffling humans for a lot of time. Metals are good conductors and insulators are not, but the question is they both contain electrons. So yes, what's the difference between them? Then we will take a U-turn and we'll come out of physics and we will go to mathematics. We will go to topology, where we'll discuss how to change from one topological class to another, and what is topology in general. We'll get a very basic and very clear idea of it. And then ultimately I will come to the last question of the talk, that is how topology emerges in condensed matter physics. This the fourth part is a bit difficult one, where we need to know a bit of mathematics, but don't worry, I think that will be okay. So the first question is how condensed matter physics evolved. So as for any story, I will also start the story with saying that once upon a time there were early humans. Okay, so this is so-called the null state of anything, that is they didn't know anything. Their life was much more difficult than what we have now. They had a very difficult life to lead. Their main target was to gather food and defend themselves from enemies, that is the wild animals. So they need to, in order to do that, they need tools and tools or weapons, but they didn't have the availability of tools that we have now. So they made very basic tools out of the materials that they got from their surroundings, and that were stones. So they try to give the stone shape and change the geometry of the stone a bit so that they can be used as tools and weapons. Now, this logic of taking materials from our environment and making something useful out of it, that logic is already inbuilt in animals. That is, there is nothing new about humans. So I gave a picture of a bird making her nest. So what she does is, what she gets in nearby environment, she uses that to make a nest and make something useful out of it. So this is already being built in animals, and this was the first generation of tools that humans could make. And with this tool, they could define these tools again. So with these tools, they can cut wood and make tools with wood as well as stones. Now you can see the resemblance of these tools with the tools that we use now. So from it, I'm talking about around thousands and thousands of years ago, and now also nothing has been changed that much. And also it's mostly the geometry is at least same. So they were good at finding shapes. And now these were all about tools, and now we had some big inventions that led humanity to what we are now. From that stage where we had nothing, the first invention that changed humans a lot is the invention of wheel. You all know this. That is one of the greatest invention of mankind. Wheel helps us to transport from one place to another. So we had materials in our hands, and from that we can make something called wheel, so that we can transport things from one place to another. And wheel, the basic physics principle behind the working of wheel is that the resistance that is offered by rolling friction is much less than the resistance offered by sliding friction. So it's better to roll something than to slide something. And that logic is now also being used everywhere. We see wheels on vehicles, and not only that, I like this machine. This is a very simple machine, but this works on the same fundamental principle, that is, things are better to roll than to slide. This simple machine is called ball bearing. Ball bearing is used everywhere. Wherever you see any rotating machinery rotating around an axle, there is always a ball bearing. You can just close your eyes and say there is ball bearing. So this was one of the best. Wheel was one of the best achievement of humans. Then the next achievement that changed the materials again was the invention of fire. Now fire was very important. Fire provided heat, warmth without having the sun at night time. But not only that, fire also helped humans to stay away from wild animals, or to frighten wild animals away, because they get feared from fire. But fire helped early humans to change their materials. The materials that they used was mud, clay. The pottery was not that good. So after invention of fire, all that material changed again, and all the materials were burnt, and they were the clay was burnt to make pottery and bricks. These were found from excavation sites. And the bricks that we make now also is exactly like what they did. They just put the clay on fire. That's it. And that is how we get bricks now also. Same thing. So now we have fire in our hand, and we have changed the materials that was there. Wood can be burnt into fire. The clay, pottery, and the bricks can be made much toughened using fire. And we had transport, and then we invent the early humans invent another great material that is different from wood, then stones, then clay. They are a different class of materials, and they are called metals. Metals were invented, and metals is a different class of materials than the other rest three, because metals have some important properties that make them different. The first property is they can be molded into different shape, like as of clay, pottery. They can be molded into whatever shape we need, but they are have much more strength than the clay one. So that is one benefit thing. It has high strength, obviously. And another important property of metals is they can be made into extremely sharp weapons. Now see, at that age they didn't have electricity, so there was no question of using metals as electrical wires or something, which they are used immensely now. We'll come to that. But they used metals for these purposes. Yes, there were ornamental purpose also, but we are focusing on only the use of materials. So now we'll do a fast forward in time. If we go slow like this, it will take a lifetime to complete the talk. So we'll make it a bit fast, and we will jump directly to around 16th century, where there was one person called Sir Isaac Newton. He was the starting point of physics. He was the starting point of collecting information around from the surroundings and quantifying them in pen and paper, so that we can use that again and again. So Newton's gave the theory of machines. These are called laws of mechanics. These are the first principles that we learn in physics from school life, college life, wherever we go. This is called classical mechanics. Though the theory is wrong, but the scale, or the at what speeds we live in, the theory is quite correct. So we use Newton's law indiscriminately, and it was used in 16th century. Newton's law has the central equation of Newton's law is obviously the second law, force equal to ma. But again, there is a problem and there is a flaw with this law. That is, the main problem with this law is this is a vector equation, so you have to think about the magnitude as well as direction. And one more thing, whenever you look at the equation, don't be scared of the equation. Is simple. The equation has nothing but two parts. One is the left hand side, and one is the right hand side. There are two different quantities that are linked together by an equation, and that's the beauty of any equation. Okay. So after giving these laws of machines, what happened in this planet was so-called industrial revolution. Industries began to grow exponentially. These are called exponential growth, because you extract metal. From that metals, you make machines, and that machines will in turn help us to get more and more metals and make more and more machines, and that will be go on cycling. So, and that's called exponential growth. And these growth accelerated humans. In very short time, humans leaped from one place to another. The development was very, very rapid. Then after this, the main theory that again came that shaped our present day as we are now is obviously the theory of electromagnetism. Okay, this may look the equations may look nasty, but they are okay. They are not very difficult. So the left hand side you can see Michael Faraday. Michael Faraday didn't know very much mathematics. He experimentally found out two very important things that we use in our everyday life. That is called motors and generators. That is, magnetism could give electricity, that is generator, and electricity could give you magnetism, and that can move things, and that's called motor. We use this really a lot, but he discovered motor and generators very long ago, and the mathematical quantification was given by this person. So his name is James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell gave the laws of electromagnetism. These are the four laws of electromagnetism. Everything that you see, motors, generators, everything are based on these four laws. This connects the first law connects electricity with charge, electric field with charge. The second law tells that the magnetic field does not diverge; they are curled up. The third law connects electricity and magnetism. Now, electricity and magnetism are two very different things. They are not same thing. At first instance, they don't look really, really different. But these equations connect magnetism and electricity. That is, electricity can be generated out of magnetism, and vice versa. The magnetism can be generated out of a current and a change in electric field. So these equations summarizes the electromagnetism, and the previous slides summarized Newton's laws. Now these were more than enough to get wherever we are, at least now. But then these were the use of metals. So wherever you see that some part is moving due to electricity, there is somewhere a motor behind that, definitely. The fans, there's everywhere, everything. Pumps, they are all the same thing. So these are used quite a lot. But then these were the use of metals. We found metals, and metals are used mostly in making these things and the industries that I saw you. And now we come to another class of materials, another different class of materials that has been found by humans. That is called semiconductors. Now, semiconductors are different from metals, different from insulators, and they can do a lot of impossible things. Like, for example, no one has thought that this computer screen, it is a kind of television, will run in a with the help of a 15 volt or 12 volt battery. Just think of it. And I can give this public talk at this time of pandemic just because I have a laptop and I have my earphones, mobiles, internet, and the whole story leads to semiconductor and this device that humans made. This is called transistor. This is one of the most important device that has changed everything and made everything possible. And after that, we have semiconductor use of semiconductors. Semiconductors is used everywhere in everything. Semiconductors, LEDs, these are all diodes and transistors. These made what we are now, exactly what we are now, with the help of Newton, with the help of these two persons. Mainly, there are obviously other persons in background, but with the help of these two persons and with the help of semiconductors, this is William Shockley and other two persons standing in Bell Laboratories. They found out transistor. They invented transistor and got Nobel Prize. So I will tell you one thing. That is one evolution that we all saw. That will give a very classic example of how condensed matter is going on changing throughout my life, at least that I have seen. So I didn't have seen this 8-inch and 5 and 1/4 inch floppy, but I have seen this 3.5 inch floppy, but didn't use it very much because when I was young, mostly CDs and DVDs took the market. All the Bollywood film songs, everything was there in CDs and DVDs. People used to buy DVD drives. We also bought DVD drive, but that's of no use now because now these CDs, DVDs are obsolete, and the better storage device is pen drive. So as the storage device goes from this side to this side, the capacity of the storage devices increases, the energy efficiency of the storage devices increases, and the robustness, means the storage of data. You store the data, and the pen drives are much more robust than the DVD drives. The DVD drives is easily breakable, fragile, but these are much better. And the best thing is, yes, cloud computing. You just upload it in cloud. Know where your file will go. That's the safest way to store files. This development we all saw in 25 to 30 years. I have also seen for me, and now the computers don't have CD drives in them. The CD drives are gone. The CDs are gone, and now what will come in near future, we all don't know. But obviously, definitely there is something will come so that it can handle the problem of these large amounts of data. So this was the story of all the materials that were there from past till now, and now we will discuss what are the necessity of new materials that we need to save the future. That is, we need two modifications. The first modification is obviously more energy efficient devices. We need to make the devices energy efficient because we get really angry if the phone heats up, the battery drains quickly. These are very bad things, and this problem needed to be solved. And what we need is fast and more powerful computing. Computers are used immensely, from making this presentation to making everything, predicting weather, everything. The computer is used immensely. So we need fast and more powerful computing in order to save energy as well as increase our capability of computing, so that we can unravel much deep problems of physics and mathematics. So this was all about the materials and the evolution of condensed matter physics. I have gave you three diagrams. One is superconductors. That is a huge ongoing field of condensed matter physics nowadays, which is which wants to minimize the energy, maximize the energy efficiency and minimize the energy loss. And there is another two-dimensional material that was found quite a few years ago, and that's called graphene. This is one of the first 2D materials that humans found, and this is highly conducting. It is used in many places. It is used in increasing the efficiency of solar cell, increasing the efficiency of batteries, and God knows what else. Means in many places graphene are nowadays these are used. This has a very high tensile strength, more than steel. So it's very much useful material. And the third picture that you are looking at is called topological insulator. This is another novel material. These are called novel materials. New materials are coming, and this topological insulator is a very different kind of material. the bulk that you see, that is the inner volume, that is this square volume that you see. In this volume, nothing moves. This volume is a perfect insulator, but the surface is highly conducting. The surface is very much highly conducting, but the bulk is an insulator. So these materials have classic properties. We will discuss about, we will not discuss about superconductivity or graphene. We will discuss about topological insulators, and that's how this is one of the candidates that I will take to discuss how topology emerges in condensed matter. But there are way more variety of materials that I will tell you at the last part of my talk. So this was the complete of first section. The second section is what makes metal good conductor of electricity and what makes insulator bad conductors of electricity. This is a very good question, and the main reasoning, the main problem of this question is both metals as well as insulators, they both have electrons in them. Okay, they both have electrons in them, but why something is metallic and something is insulating, that is needed to be understood. Metals and insulators, they look very different than one another, but definitely both of them contains electron. But why metals have electrons conducting, means why the electrons can move inside a metal and why it cannot move inside insulator, that is a question that needed to be answered. So we all know that metals and the solid, any solid have bands in them. We'll come to know that how can we create bands. So in metals, we have so-called conduction band and valence band and conduction band. We need to pump electron from the conduction band, from the valence band to the conduction band, so that it can move. So in semiconductor, there is a finite band gap. In insulator, the band gap is very large, and in metal, the bands merge together. So we don't have to waste a lot of energy for the movement of the electron. And for insulator, we have to bridge the gap in order to make the electron move. So this is basic difference between metals and insulators, and the difference comes because we know that metals have free electrons. In metals, the electrons are a bit free. They are not tightly bound to something. That's why the electron can move, and it will be metallic. Now, an electron moves inside a solid is definitely a quantum mechanical problem. So we need to understand a bit of quantum mechanics to understand the formation of bands. So we know that in quantum mechanics, well, let's take a very classic example of hydrogen atom. Hydrogen atom, we know that these are the states of hydrogen atom, and these states are quantized. So the energy of these states are fixed. It can be this or this or this or this. No energies in middles are allowed. So there is a gap between two energy levels. These are not bands because these are not continuous spread of energy. These are discrete values. And that's why they are not bands, but there is a gap between them. So somehow, if we can make these levels continuous, then we can have quantum bands, isn't it? So in order to make that continuous, we will use our assumption that the electron is a bit free in metals, and in insulators they are not a bit free. So here we have the uncertainty principle. The first uncertainty principle is all known to us, that is position momentum uncertainty principle. But the second thing is not very trivial, that is called energy time uncertainty principle. I will give you this example. I will solve this example using this one so that it will be clear that let's say if you have one hydrogen atom and nothing else in the universe, then the electron will be trapped in that hydrogen atom and it cannot move anywhere. So the delta T, the spread in time, is infinite. It has infinite lifetime to stay there. It will not move anywhere else. So this is infinity. So delta E, that is the spread in energy, must be 0. That what makes the energy of this hydrogen atom discrete. And now we bring more and more atoms together to form a solid. This is the basic reality inside a solid. It has a lattice underneath it, and we now, since there are many there is a freedom for one electron. Let's say we have one electron, so there is a freedom so that the electron can move from this place or this place, from atom to atom, so that the lifetime of staying in one atom is not infinity anymore. It has been reduced and it has been come down, so that delta E, the spread in energy, has got a bit further, and then the discrete energy levels are not discrete, they are bands. So This is a diagram showing that interatomic spacing is decreasing. So if you have a great large interatomic spacing, think that these atoms are separated by a huge distance, then you have only discrete energy levels as of hydrogen, same as that. But then when we decrease the distance a bit, so that the distance decreases and we are in this place, then we have something like insulating phase. We have already two bands formed and they are not merging with each other. So we have insulating phase. Then suddenly at some interatomic spacing, we have a metallic phase because these bands are merging together. And then again, we have insulating phase. So we'll try to model this, that how to get from insulator to a metal and then again to an insulator. That is, if there is some parameter that we can tune in order to change from the metallic state to insulating state and again metallic state, then it will be very clear to us that what is the difference between metals and insulators. So this is what we are going to do. So first we will take a free electron. There is nothing to bound it, nowhere, no potential, nothing else. Electron is free. And if we solve the whole quantum mechanics problem, then we will get to a result that is exactly classical. That is, energy of the electron will be p square by 2m. Okay, and the momentum p square by 2m momentum is h cross k. So k is something called a wave vector, which goes as inverse of wavelength. The electron has a wave nature of it definitely, and it has a particle nature of it too. So this is for the wave nature. It has a wave vector, and that wave vector corresponds to momentum. So ultimately, your energy is only kinetic energy, that is p square by 2m, which is half m v square. And if I plot the band, if I plot the dispersion relation, this is called dispersion relation. That is energy as a function of momentum, that is 1 by lambda. Okay, so in this case, it is p square by 2m, and there is no one to bound it, nowhere. So this forms a continuous energy. This forms a band of continuous energy. See, the energy can be 0, the energy can be whatever you want in y-axis, and everything is continuous. All values are possible to be taken. So this defines a continuous spread of energy. So the electron is fully free. Now we will not make the electron fully free. Rather, we will put the electron inside a lattice, and we will consider one thing, that is the lattice consists of all same atoms. So all same atoms are there, and the interaction between the atoms are also same. That is denoted by so-called T. The hopping, the electron can move from one place to another. The electron can jump from one atom to another. That is called hopping. And this model gives us the band diagram of this model is just a single band. It exactly looks like the parabolic one, the free electron one at this place, and then it bends a bit, but then too it has no gaps in it, and that's why this is metallic. The electrons can move from the one place to another. And then now what we will do is, since we had only one kind of atoms, one kind of interaction, the minimal deviation that we can do from this is we can introduce 2 atoms, not 3, not 4. We will introduce only 2 atoms, and that will give something called the dimer chain. Here we have 2 atoms that are repeated periodically. So you have to define a basis. This is called a basis, and that is being repeated periodically throughout the space. And we have 2 kinds of interaction. One is, let's say, Ta, and another is Tv. Ta, Tv, Ta, Tv. Like that means we have 2 different kind of bonding between the chain. And this minimal deviation is more than enough to get an insulator. If we plot the dispersion relation, let me tell you that there is a way from this lattice to this dispersion relation, but that way is a bit mathematical one. I will definitely show you that at last. But I have summarized the result in first place. So that is, I have summarized the result in first place, and that say that this thing will be insulating because it has a finite gap at the Brillouin zone boundary. There is something defined called Brillouin zone. That is, let's say, if you are in this place at very low wave vector, that is k is around let's say around 0. So your wavelength is around infinity. So your wavelength is very large. So basically, it cannot see the lattice. It will move like a free electron. So in this region, it will behave like a free electron. Now, as you increase the wave vector and you decrease the wavelength, what happens is some kind of resonance occurs between that the distance, the wavelength becomes comparable with the lattice sides, and the electron gets blocked. The electron cannot move in that, and it gets blocked and it forms standing waves. So these are part of difficult solid state physics. It forms standing waves, and because of that, this gap arises. But well, just think of the theory like this: we will need two kind of interaction to form a gap, and that will be enough to give us an insulator. And this model can give us two kinds of interaction. That is, once your this TATB, and another is TBTA. So basically, which one was it has two kind of interaction. So one may be greater than the other, one may be less than the other, and both of them, one greater than the other and one less than the other, both of them gives us insulating phases. They are not metallic because they have, see, a gap. There is a gap, so they are not metallic. This y-axis is energy, so there is a gap. It is not metallic. And if your both these interactions are same, then it reduces to our normal this chain, which because of which we have only a single band, and that's metallic. So in conclusion, we know that in metals, electrons are delocalized throughout the chain. Here I saw you a plot of that periodic chain in which the electron quite moves, oscillates, and moves like a wave, and it can come out from this region too. So it's metallic. The electron is everywhere, and I've shown you this diagram. This diagram corresponds to a complete insulating state. That is, we saw that we only need two kinds of interaction to make something insulating, but here I have all interactions are different, and that's why the electron is being drastically blocked at the middle of the lattice, and it does not move here and here. It only stays in this place. That's it. And these kind of principles are called Anderson localization. They're very important in physics, and they can be seen everywhere in nature. That is, let's say if you have a road which is straight road, one dimension, and there we have different kinds of vehicles moving. Let's say totos, autos, cars, bikes, everything with different velocities. Then what one can conclude? What will be the future after some time? It will be jammed somewhere. Definitely, that's the future. So this corresponds to Anderson localization in traffic too. So now we come to the third section, which is a bit interesting one, that what is topology. So topology is a branch of mathematics that deals with global geometry of the system. It does not deals with the local geometry, rather it deals with the system as a whole, and continuous deformations. Okay. Yeah.
How?
Was anyone questioning me?
So what is topological class?
Oh, okay. We'll come to know that. Wait for one or two slides. We will come to know what is topological class. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So topology is a branch of mathematics that deals with global geometry of the system, not the local one. So if you want to change topological classes are like geometric objects. For now, let's say if you have a triangle and you have a square. So if you want to make a square to a triangle, then you need to cut one side and join the two. It will be a triangle. So in order to change these different topologies, object belonging to different topologies, we need to make something discontinuous deformation, which is referred as tearing or gluing. That is basically you will use the scissors and glue to change the topology of different objects. So these are this slide gives you a very clear example that what is topological class. And just think of all these all these shapes as they are made out of clay, so that you can deform them, tear them, whatever you need to do. So the topological class, they are quantified by the system having number of holes in them. So a sphere have no holes in them. A donut has one hole because this is one hole. This is one hole through the system. You cannot change this donut to a sphere. You need to close the hole in order to do that, and that refers to the gluing, and will change the topological class definitely. And this is something that belongs to class 2 or genus 2, where we have 2 holes in the system, and here we have 3 holes in the system. So this number of holes in the system specifies the topological class. Okay. And the continuous deformation, it means that we have a sphere and we can continuously deform it to change to a cup. See, I'm not making any holes in the. If it was made out of clay, it is easy to deform a sphere to this. But we cannot make a sphere to coffee mug if there is one handle in it. So this handle basically provides a hole in the system, and that this coffee mug can be continuously deformed to a donut. But from this to this cannot be done by continuous deformation. So now this diagram also looks same, but here I have the one thing which is a big bowl kind of thing, and it has some object with two handles in it, so it has two holes, see, 1 and 2, and this is exactly like a scissor which has two holes in it, 1 and 2, and the other parts can be continuously deformed. No worries about that. Now if you break one handle of this thing, then it will be topologically similar to a coffee cup, because it will have another handle remaining, which is again similar to a donut. Now again, if you break the next handle, it has no handles remaining, and then this will be equal to topologically equivalent to bowling ball and marble. If you add more and more handles to it, it will be something like this, more and more holes in the system. The holes that cannot be created or destroyed continuously. You need discontinuous deformation. You need to glue. Then only you can destroy it. And you need to tear if you want to create it. So the mathematical quantification of these topological classes is given by so-called Gauss-Bonnet theorem. Okay, the Gauss-Bonnet theorem is not very difficult. It just tells you that you have something called Gaussian curvature that defines the curvature of the surface, and you integrate it throughout the whole surface area and divide it by 4 pi. This integral always gives us an integer number. It will not give us any decimal points. It will always give us an integer number, and that number is defined as 1 minus genus. Genus is the number of holes in the system. We'll take a classic example of a sphere, which is easy because sphere has a constant Gaussian curvature, which depends on 1 by r square. So if we do the integration, we perform the integration, and we know the area of the sphere is 4 pi r square. The left hand side, that the integral becomes 1, which is equal to 1 minus g, which definitely implies that g is equal to 0. So sphere has no holes in it. Sphere has a genus 0. Like this, spheres have no holes in it. They do not have one hole in it. So if the whole integration was performed for a donut, here we would get the answer 0. Then only g will be 1. Now we'll take another example to discuss topology, and it's another very interesting thing. It's called the Mobius strip. Okay, so here I will say you how to make Mobius strip. It's very easy. Just take a rectangular length of paper like the scale, and if you join the two ends of the paper normally, then it will be something called zero turn loop. And if you give it a half twist, not a 360 degree turn, 180 degree turn, then again if you join the two ends, then it will be something called a Mobius strip. Now this Mobius strip and this zero turn loop, they are quite different objects. They are not same objects at all. They are different objects. And how to distinguish between them? Well, we will perform the same experiment. A scientist will distinguish between things by performing the same experiment in both of them, and if it gives a different result, then they are quite different, and it gives drastic different results. First, you cut the Mobius strip into half. Okay, as the scissor directed, just cut it into half, and what will happen? Something is very non-trivial. It will give us another Mobius strip with more number of turns. But if you do the same experiment for this zero turn loop and cut it into half, just transversely slice into half, you will get two zero turn loops, nothing else. That's trivial. This thing is trivial, and this thing is non-trivial. The difference can also be done by a very physical experiment, and that is if we want to move a vehicle, let's say, on the surface of a zero turn loop and a Mobius strip. Mind that these two ends are connected parallelly, and these two ends are connected anti-parallelly because you give a half twist. Here, the vehicle returns to its original position again after some time. So basically, if I denote it by position x, then I can draw analogy that x will go to x, and that means x e to the power I into 0. Anything to the power 0 is 1. So I've written it like this way. There is nothing harm in it. And if I do the same experiment for Mobius strip, then what I see is after some time this will move and this will emerge from other end, and it will be opposite. So as if the position is different, but then too, if I say this, all the vertical strips are same position, then this x, as if it goes to minus x, something opposite happens. So that's why I took this factor into a minus sign. Well, these are not correct things. These I just draw analogies with, so that the understanding could be done. So, and this minus sign could be accounted by writing e to the power I pi. E to the power I pi is -1. That's called Euler's identity. And so this minus sign can be taken care of. So the whole process of just the vehicle coming into its own position is just the whole story is all about change, change in just a phase factor, whether it's either 0 or pi. We see these phases in physics, that is called geometric phase. For example, a very clear example will be if you stand on this North Pole and if you direct arrow in some direction. This example we got to know from our classical mechanics class. This was a very great example, very easy to understand, and move through this any longitude, and then again come throughout the equator and again come back to its original position. The system returns to its own position, but there is an angle between these two arrows. So everything does not return to its same position. This is a geometric phase example from quantum mechanics. What it's done that the electron beam has been split into two, and the electron beam acquires a phase factor which depends on interestingly depends on the flux which is inside the solenoid. This is a solenoid and this is an electron beam that is split apart and again interfered with one another. There is a phase difference between these two paths. Here the phase difference was 0, yet there is a phase difference, and the phase difference depends on how much flux there is inside the solenoid. There is outside, there is no magnetic field. So I don't know how the electron sense that, but somehow it can sense. So now we come to the last part of the talk, that is how topology basically emerges in condensed matter physics. So we will come to our that Dymar model again, where we had two different kinds of hopping and two different kinds of condition, whether one interaction was preferred than the other and another interaction was not preferred than the other. So this is the only slide that contains mathematics, nasty mathematics, difficult to understand. Well, but then there is I told you there is something problem with Newton's law. So in order to solve that problem, there is some mechanics called Hamiltonian mechanics. It's a bit difficult to understand, but that also give you same result when you write everything in terms of energy. Okay, so without explaining the first step, I will directly jump to this matrix. This can be explained that, let's say you have two atoms and you have one electron. Okay, so the electron stays in atom number 1 and it is attracted by atom number 1. That will give you certain energy, and that is this element 1 1. Now this element is 1 2. This is 2 1. This is 2 2. So 1 2 means so 2 2 means the electron is in number 2 atom, and how much number 2 atom attracts it, that is 2 2. Now 1 2 means the electron is in 1 and how much the second atom attracts it, and 2 1 means the electron is in 2 and how much the first atom attracts it. So there was two atoms on the model, the Dymar model. That's why it was called Dymar model, because there was two atoms. And this is how the Hamiltonian is. It is the total energy of the system. It's a matrix and it's written in this form. Now if we need to find the energy out of this matrix, this is not something. The Hamiltonian is the total energy of the system, but since these are not diagonal and this is a matrix, what we need to do is we need to diagonalize this matrix. There are mathematical process to do that. And after diagonalizing, the final result that we arrive is called the dispersion relation. Okay, the dispersion relation is energy as a function of momentum. That's it, nothing else. And here the dispersion relation looks like this. And when we plot the dispersion relation, as I have shown you the previous diagram, it looked like this. So this was the whole process of getting from a lattice to a band diagram. It's a difficult process, but well, it's not that difficult to understand. You just need a bit practice and stay with the mathematics long. That's it. So these two graphs I have shown you. These two graphs have band gaps in them, and these two are quite insulating. So we concluded in that metal insulator section that we need an uniform interaction between atoms to get a metal. Any slighted deviation from that uniform attraction will give us insulating states. But these insulating states look quite simple. Let me see you this. So if you can see this plot, the TA increases, the TA increases, and the TB is kept to be constant. So as you can see, as TA it becomes equal to TB, that's the point where it's metallic, the band gap becomes 0. And again, if this is increasing again and again, this becomes again an insulator. This is the insulating phase. Only, yeah, this is metallic, and then again it breaks and it forms an insulator. But these two insulating phases might look same, but they are not same, they are different. And how they are different, screen. Okay, so these two insulating phases are different because if we see matrix are 2 cross 2 matrix are two things. One is the eigenvalue and another is the eigenvector. We have looked at the eigenvalues and plotted them and concluded that these two looks identical. But what about the eigenvectors? We need to see how the eigenvectors look like. And there is, well, another logic to write the eigenvectors. And when we look at the eigenvectors of the whole system, what happens is, well, Asboth has defined it like U and V. So when two hoppings, one is greater than the other and one is less than the other, these two are insulating phases. And when they both are equal, it becomes metallic, the gap closes. And if we look at the this so-called eigenvectors all together, then what happens is we can see that for this phase, the circle does not encircle the origin. For this phase, the circle touches the origin, and for this phase, the circle encircles the origin. So for U equal to V or TA equal to TB, both of the hopping same, the origin will be, the circle will just touch the origin. Any slightest deviation from it will give us two different insulating phases. Either for one, that this will be encircling the origin, and this will be encircling the origin, and for the other phase, this will not be encircling the origin. As if we say that the origin is a hole in the system, this circle has a hole in it, and that's why this is like a donut. And this circle, C, does not winds the origin, so it does not have that winding of the origin, and that's why this thing is like a sphere. Okay. And there is one theorem that if you have this winding, okay, the one phase will be winding the origin, one phase will be not winding the origin, and another phase will be winding the origin. If this thing happens, then we will have something called H states that I saw all of you in the topological insulator, the first slides of topological insulator, that there is something called surface states. The surface is conducting, the bulk is an insulator, and this gives you a very clear picture how it's done. That inside the bulk, this electron rotates around closed orbit, so they can't move anywhere. But around the edge, you don't have the sphere to close, so that's why it jumps off, and it moves like this in that dimension, in the extra dimension, one dimension. And basically these are topologically protected, and our dimer model, though very naive and very less accurate model, can also give the flavor of the H state at least. So these H states are highly conducting. These H states are used in high speed and low power electronics. Okay, these H states are topologically protected, so it can be used to protect the quantum computers that I was telling you, to increase the efficiency. They can be used to increase efficiency, and they can be used to build quantum computers because they can protect the states. So there's a person called Andre in Princeton University. He is a great researcher of this topological matter. And one of his quote that I will say, that is, you cannot get rid of these surface states. You take a hammer, you hit the sample, and the surface state still remains as it is. It does not go anywhere. So this is how he tells that the surface states are really, really robust. So due to all this technological application, it ultimately led to the 2016 Nobel Prize of Duncan, Haldane, and Austerlitz. They won the Nobel Prize for topological phase transition and topological phases of matter. One clear example was topological insulator. There are way other examples, so-called topological insulators, topological Dirac semimeters, topological Weiss semimeters, topological superconductivity is there. And the higher order versions of all of these insulators as well as these semimeters, they are difficult topic to understand, but they are they are highly useful in both experimental as well as theoretical fields. So that's it for now. These are my reference. I have given many websites in first place. You can go to this third article. This is an article by the HOD of Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, Professor Ratnamala Chatterjee, and she writes the article in a very in such a fashion that everyone will understand. So you can go through this, and these books are also easily understandable. So you can go through any of them. And my email address was obviously given in the poster, so you can email me to know things, and you can learn all these topics if you want to learn in weekend. So thank you, have a nice weekend, and obviously at last, questions.
Thank you, Shubhajyoti. I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed this talk. Now let's move to
thank
the
you.
questions. I see Shomik has asked a question. Why topology plays a crucial role in resolving issues of efficient energy use?
Yeah. Okay. So this was told by in this slide that these states that are there, that are highly conducting, and what creates resistance is called impurities. Okay. So if you have impurities inside your system, the electron cannot move very freely. Obviously, it's after all an impurity, and then it can affect the states of the electron, so that they cannot move. Now these age states are robust against impurities. Okay, so if your bulk material is not that much very thoroughly made, if it has impurities, then too these age states will not be affected so much. That's why they are way more efficient than the other materials. Okay.
Okay, so there is no response. Let's move to the next question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Nasim has asked, what is the physical significance of geometric phase?
Oh, okay. So see the geometric phase. Good question. That what is the physical significance? See, the geometric phase is a physical thing. Okay, you can measure the geometric phase, so it's quite physical. And here the geometric phase arises due to the change in the geometry of the system. Okay, here if I draw a triangle, all the angles, sum of all the angles will not be 180, because it is not an Euclidean space. It is a curved space. So the logic is different. So this underlying curved space is responsible for creating this phase difference when the system is being returned to its original position. That's it. And another clearly physical example of this phase is seen in so-called Aronoff-Bohm effect. And this gives you a realization that these phases can be thought of experimentally. And this was seen experimentally. You can search for literature. There is great literature in internet which clearly suggests that experiments have been done to see that these electrons are acquiring a geometric phase. Okay. If you know quantum mechanics, you have two things. You have one is called the dynamic phase, so how the wave function changes with time, and another is called geometric phase. Okay, that is acquired by the system when it splits apart, and then again it comes back to its original position. Okay. So is that answer your question?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well.
So there is another question from Polomide.
Yeah.
I'm reading it. I have a question. Even if electrons are at adjoint atoms in a lattice chain, why would they hop from one atom to another? That is, why can't they just stay on their parent atoms?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is the physical reasoning behind metals and insulators. Okay, so in metals, what you are telling is that the electrons want to be in its parent atom. Okay, so for that, in insulators, most of the time the electron stays in one of its parent atom, and it does not. That's why it's not free, and that's why it's not metallic. Okay, and there is one more reasoning of that. Let me come to this thing. Quantum mechanics a bit. Okay, so you can see the energy levels of hydrogen. Okay, so the ground state energy level of hydrogen is minus 13.6 electron volts, The next energy level has a lot of gap, and it's this. And now when you go on increasing the energy levels, you can see the electron is getting more and more loose to the hydrogen atom, more and more loose to the hydrogen atom as you go on farther and farther and farther. And ultimately what will happen is, due to Bohr's correspondence principle, is that you will get these levels will be merged into bands. Okay, so metals have free electrons. Their electrons are bound to the parent nucleus, obviously, but the highest occupied electrons, they are higher at so much higher state that they are a bit loosely bound to the nucleus, and that electrons only contribute to the conduction. The electrons which are highly tightly bound to the nucleus will definitely not contribute. Okay, so is that answer again your question?
So we cannot see
Yeah,
the
hello.
response. Let's
Okay,
move
yeah.
to the next question. Okay, Oishurja has asked, what is meant by the insulated phase?
Okay, so what is meant by the insulated phase? So let's come to the drastic thing, so that okay, let's come to this only. So insulating phase means the phase in which the electrons will not move. That is, if you apply a battery to that material, the electrons will not move and the bulb will not glow. That's an insulator. And the physical reasoning for that is, see, if you have a wood, okay, let's say if you have a wood, that's a definite example of an insulator. But in this low regime of electricity, around 220 volts or 300 volts, but if you take around 1 lakh volts, let's say 2 lakh volts, 5 lakh volts, then this wood will also be a conductor. The atmosphere, the air becomes conducting. That's why thunderstorm happens. So the air is insulating, but it becomes conducting at that high energy scale. So the underlying physics is, you have a band gap, you have conduction, you have valence band. This cannot conduct, because as the previous question was asked, that these electrons are tightly bound to that nucleus, and they will not conduct. Now there must be this gap needed to be bridged. So there must be a supply of energy externally. The battery has no potential to supply this electron so much energy that it will jump to the conduction band, and that's why the wood is an insulator. But if there is more than enough energy available, then everything will be conducting. Definitely, you can bridge the gap. Okay, so this is all about insulating phase.
Okay, moving to the next question. Diksha Das has asked, what does topologically protected mean?
Okay, so well, can I show you one more plot? I think it will be much more better if I can show you one more plot at least. I saw a band diagram in the morning, I think. That will be beneficial. Yeah, kind of like this. See, this is a wrong thing. Well, the program gave a wrong answer, but anyways, it can be explained like that. What you do is, well, this is for a different model, I see. But anyways, topological protection means you change the parameter of your system. Okay, means you change some of means from the periodic arrangement of the array. That is, the dimer chain was also periodically arranged. Okay, the dimer chain was also periodically arranged, but you tamper your system. Okay, you introduce disorder in your system. That is what you do, is you change that values of hopping in that matrix, everything you do that. Then what happens is, your system is no more periodic, it has some impurities in the system, and then we check that whether that state can withstand that impurity or it cannot withstand that impurity. So
Hello, Shubhajyoti, are you there? Shubhajyoti, your microphone is off. I guess there is some network issues. Please wait for some minutes.
Sorry, is the speaker back?
No, ma'am.
See, but I can see him actually. Now I can't see. So maybe we can wait a couple more minutes.
Okay, actually, there are some network issues. The speaker will be back in a few minutes.
Okay, so am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible.
Oh, thank you. So yes, does another question remains?
Yes, there is another question from Tanya Patra. In eigenvector
Yeah, go
slide,
on, definitely.
what is meant by the winding?
So can you see the screen?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay, eigenvectors. Okay. Okay, where this one?
Yes, it's visible.
This slide? Okay. So yeah, the winding, the winding is defined as whether this circle can be constructed by some mathematical theories, okay, and these circles represent all the eigen vectors of the system from this value of k. So k can take any value from this to this. K can take any value from this to this. So for any value of k, all the eigenvectors are plotted simultaneously. So that's the physical meaning of this circle, and winding means the circle in either this eigenvectors, the circle formed by the eigenvectors. In this case, they don't encircle the origin, and the origin is basically a hole. See, if you don't have a hole in your system, then this is obviously a sphere, and if you have one hole at least in your system, then this is a donut. Okay, so this I refer to as winding, and you cannot change that winding. V will be less than W for any value of that. Your winding will remain as let's say this winds the origin, so it has a binary digit 1, and this does not wind the origin, so it has a winding 0. That's it. So is it fine?
Yes, she has replied, thank you. Jahid has a question.
Okay.
What is the reason for topological insulators that it can carry current through surface, but not through the inside bulk material, a rod-like structure which you have shown at the beginning?
Yeah. Good. So there is something called okay, so let me tell you that also. There is something called bulk boundary correspondence. Okay, so the bulk basically the band diagram of the bulk looks like this. Okay, if you only have your the hoppings that you define, that the interaction between the atoms, okay, they are same, so you have a monomeric chain, then only it will be metallic, or else slightest deviation from that will give you an insulator. So the topological insulators are insulators. Obviously they are insulators because they have a gap opened at the these are called bulk dispersion relation, because uh, uh, when these dispersion relations are plotted, then your system has no edges. It's you are well inside the volume of the system. Okay, you are well inside the volume of the material, so you have bulk properties, and you plot the band diagram and you get gap. So that's why it cannot conduct electricity from the bulk. But since the eigenvectors give you a winding, a clear winding of 1 from above this phase, okay, below this thing they are 0, but above this everything is 1. See, at v equal to 0 also, it winds the origin, so you cannot change that anyway. You cannot change that however you deform your v and w. Wait, just v, till it's less, there will be the origin winded, and that's why it will give you a winding number. And due to that you will have edge states. Okay, and the physics wise, if I want to say, then inside the bulk these electron orbits are completed. Okay, so in circles, they encircle around the bulk, so they don't move here and there. But around the boundary only, there is no material where they can complete the orbit, so they are forced to jump from one to another, and that's why it conducts current from the surface, or if it's 2 dimension from the edges, and in 1 dimension, yes, obviously the edge state. Okay.
Okay, he's replied, thank you. Is there any other question?
Yeah. Great.
If there aren't any question, can I ask one, Indira?
Yes, ma'am. Please continue.
Okay, very nice talk, Shubhajyoti. So
Yeah, thank you.
my question is that you spoke about emergence of topology in condensed matter physics. Now,
Yeah.
as you already said, so the way you started the talk is you spoke about the early human civilizations and how
Yeah, how
materials,
the materials went. Yeah.
how the materials and discoveries have improved our civilization. We are talking about little bit about quantum computers. So I would be interested to know that in the context of topology, do you have any feel of like the status of the experimental basis of this field, that what we expect to extract by understanding topology, and what is the status of making devices or making materials, as we have seen, that have helped in progressing the field?
Yeah. Yes, yes. Yes, definitely. I know about some of the experimental evidences. We now also know the some of the experimental evidences of quantum computer, that is Google or IBM and Microsoft. They are always, quarreling with each other for who can give the quantum computer at first to the market. But now also the quantum computers and the topological materials that has been promised to help to build this quantum computer. That's why you have this all the materials that I tell you, topological insulators, these semi metals, this topological superconductivity. They all are linked to one another, and they all are linked to the invention of quantum computers. Okay, so now also the main basic problem is we cannot devise materials so that they become economically or engineeringly feasible to make as well as to sell in market. Okay, these electronics items are way more cheaper than them. So now also we need a great and huge research to how to make these materials economically feasible. They are till now it has all means topology insulators are present, but only in laboratory purposes or research purposes of quantum computing. But till now, I don't think it has a long time to go for a commercial market.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have one question. So, what is the
Yeah,
origin
go
of the
on.
tide binding Hamiltonian?
Okay, great. So what is the origin of the tide binding Hamiltonian? Okay, so this can be thought of like that. Let me see, if it's possible. I don't know. Zoom is creating a bit of problem, but see, you are the tide binding Hamiltonian is a model. Okay, there is nothing that the model is true, and it's wrong also for some cases. Okay, so for some model it works, and for some model it does not work. I will show you what is the. I'll show you how this comes. Kept this anyways. Yeah, so this is basically modeled as a movement of an electron. Okay, you have a movement of an electron. You have one electron in your system. You assume that's a clearly wrong thing to assume that you have only one electron in your system. But somehow that assumption gives us correct result in many places. That's why we have the band theory is so successful. But yes, definitely in some places it fails, and then the theory needed to be modified. So what is happening is, see, you can clearly see the electron is moving from one end to another, and its model how, see, let's it come. Okay, it has been destroyed in one, created in two. It has been destroyed in two, created in three, destroyed in four, created in five, destroyed in six, created in seven, and it moves like that way. It has been destroyed in the preceding sites, and it's created in the next upcoming sites. So this is how you model the movement of an electron. and that is the origin of your tide binding Hamiltonian. I don't know, you all don't know this field theoretic notations, but this something, this daggers, these dagger operators are something like creation operators of the harmonic oscillator. Okay, they create particles. So this is being destroyed in J plus 1th side, and it's been created in this side, and then again it has been destroyed in BJ side, and again it's been created in AJ plus 1 side. So this basically models the movement of the electron. Okay, so this is the origin of tide binding Hamiltonian. It has the movement of the electron has been modeled like this: tick, 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 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. It goes like that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. Now I would,
Is that clear?
yeah, it's clear, and I hope we can talk to you over email if we have any questions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
That's very kind of you. And now I would like to request to Shomadip to continue the next session.
So I'm stopping my screen share.
Yeah.
Thank you, Subhajit, for the talk. We have really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. We have really enjoyed it. And that is the end for the first session of precision today. We can continue at 3 p.m. with our physics quiz Braintropy, and at the 6 p.m. we have a panel discussion on future of physics. I will request everyone to attend all of these sessions, and let us end the session here. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Subhajit, once again.